In South Australia's mid-north, a blaze tore through more than 85,000 hectares last November, killing 2 people. Just over 3 months on, and the clean-up and recovery are far from over. One of the biggest challenges is repairing the very foundation of agriculture, the soil. But as Kerry Staight reports, a combination of smart farming and generosity is helping people pick up the pieces.
It was a fire the likes of which many never thought possible on the plains north of Adelaide.
We were just confronted with 2 kilometres of 30-foot-high wall of flame. It was just unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it, and too many of my neighbours had very close calls.
A fast and unforgiving front, fuelled by crops and thick stubble.
Normally a fire doesn't burn the whole farm, but in this case it burnt our whole farm and a lot of other people's as well.
$23 million worth of fodder and unharvested grains were destroyed.
There is no sign of the crop left. There's no burnt heads on the ground. There's nothing left but dirt.
Among the livestock losses, 500 pigs, more than 53,000 chickens and almost 18,000 sheep.
It's your worst nightmare, absolutely. There's nothing more devastating than something that you've looked after all your life, and you've got to put them down.
And then there were the homes, 91 destroyed in a matter of hours, some going back generations, others brand new.
It was horrible. When I finally got back in and half the house was on fire, there was an odd fascination. I knew every nail and every post as it went up, and so I sort of needed to feel it, watch it come down.
The smoke has now cleared to reveal too much missing, and what is still there is a sad reminder of life before the fire. This is all that's left of Ed and Belinda Kay's dream home at Pinery. The father of 2 spent 3 years building it with the help of friends. His family got to enjoy it for just 1.
Between kids and renovation, you can pretty much, blot out friendships and everything else. You put your life on hold to do it, and so to watch it go up was very devastating.
The agriculture industry consultant designed the house to be energy efficient and fire resistant, but it was no match for the inferno that engulfed it.
I must admit, on the day, even though the carnage was happening and we were at arm's length from it, until I saw it, I truly didn't believe it was going to go up.
Where to now for you? Will you rebuild?
We're not 100% sure on any decision just yet. Yeah, we're not 100%. Yeah.
A few minutes down the road, Ed Kay's father-in-law, farmer Andrew BARR, is finalising plans to fill the space where his house used to stand. What have you lost?
Our house, 5 sheds, probably 10 kilometres of fencing, a harvester, a new spray tractor, some field bins, a lot of our farm infrastructure, a lot of our domestic gardens, which are our little oases to escape from a hot day.
While the remains of Andrew BARR's home have been removed, houses and sheds are still being demolished around the region as the clean-up enters its 4th month. Paddocks are also littered with dozens of burnt-out headers, tractors and other vital farm equipment. The insurance bill has now topped $170 million, with almost 2,000 claims made. And it's the commercial, mostly agricultural losses that account for around 3/4 of that. But for many farmers, one of the most significant losses is something that's much harder to put a figure on: the soil.
This area would never ever been this bare in the history of South Australia because it's about a 50 or 60 square K of ground that's just got no coverage on it whatsoever, no protection from the elements. And every time the wind blows, the erosion's been horrendous.
It may look like a wasteland now, but this is good country, which has become increasingly productive over the last few decades as growers embraced no-till farming.
Most of us pride ourselves on having no erosion anymore with the conservation farming systems that we run. And we haven't seen our soils for probably 10 years. This year we've got far too good a look at them.
For Andrew BARR, who is also a director of the Grains Research and Development Corporation, watching the soil he has nurtured blow away is almost as bad as losing his house. And there could be more pain to come.
It's just such a long time now to the opening rains. If opening rains are normally in April, May, these soils have been exposed for 4 months at least, so that's how it gets exacerbated. And of course, every time there's a wind, it's just reinforcing the problem.
So what's been the strategy with all the hills? To tackle that problem, farmers are looking at all options to hold their fragile land together until seeding. From spreading clay and piggery litter to sowing a temporary cover crop, as Andrew BARR has done on his sandier country. So how much of a welcome sight is this?
Green is definitely the colour we like seeing at the minute.
So the crop is purely here to hold the soil together, is it?
Yeah, it's just here temporarily. If we could get it through to mid to late tillering, our plan would be to spray it out.
So I've noticed there's a few weeds here as well. You're not getting rid of those in a big hurry?
This year we're turning a blind eye. We're happy to see anything game enough to grow under these conditions, and we'll take soil protection from whatever source.
For many farmers, this year protection equals ploughing, where lumps of soil are brought to the surface. Something that goes against the grain of growers like Mark Branson, who hasn't tilled his property prior to sowing for 15 years. But it's better than the alternative.
It wears you down, day after day of when the winds are up, just blowing dust all day long. It's not nice. I'll go back.
Mark Branson's Stockport farm has been hit by fire before, 20 years ago. But nothing prepared he and son Sam for what confronted them last November. He managed to save his house, but not much else, with a lot of the family's history gutted, including his great-grandparents' old home and car.
This is deep in our family, the old buildings here. This is the second generation house for the farm. I'm fifth, Sam's sixth generation, so this house behind us has been around here for a long time, and no, I'm not gonna pull it down.
He also lost his header, tractor, sheds, a durum crop and more than 50 kilometres of fencing. But what hit the hardest was the loss of 1,600 sheep that were killed in the fire or had to be put down after.
I'm still losing sleep over it because I was out there doing it myself. So I just pray to everyone that that never happens to them because it's the worst feeling in the world.
Split it up, split it up! It's a feeling the Fisher family at Wasleys knows well. This was one of their homes on the day of the fire. While CFS crews arrived just in time to save it, 2 years' worth of livestock feed went up. And when the flames settled, the highly regarded Suffolk sheep breeders discovered their entire ewe stud, which they'd spent 25 years working on, was gone.
There's a lot of those sheep, they're almost, you know them by name almost, and they've been to shows and they follow you around the yard like a dog, and to see them in that condition, and it was pretty horrific.
But amid the heartache and ruin also came some hope, with the discovery that most of last season's lambs had survived.
In the paddock they're in, there's a watercourse with trees in the bottom of it, and they camped there on warm days, and the fire moving fast went straight over the top, and they just got out unscathed, which is nothing short of a miracle.
With potentially some very good genetics still in their own backyard, Brian Fisher's son Troy went looking further afield in an effort to rebuild the family's flock and reputation as quickly as possible. This is the response. Breeders from 6 top studs donating their prized animals to the family for an embryo transfer program. And the results of the first flushing, which is when fertilised eggs are collected, is better than Troy Fisher had hoped.
16 out of her, Troy.
That's great.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Really good. Yeah, very pleased with it.
It's blown us away. It's amazing that they've contributed some of their very best ewes. These are some of the best ewes in Australia. And it's things like that that have really helped motivate us and get us back up on our feet.
Now the rush is on to get the farm ready for the surviving and future livestock. Like many of their neighbours, they have focused on stabilising the all-important foundation first. But they've come up with a cultivation pattern that also makes their place stand out.
So you've got a design unlike anyone else. Where did this come from?
I can't take all the credit for it. My father came up with the idea and did it back in the 1940s when they had some really bad droughts in South Australia with a team of horses and a cultivator, so it's not new.
So why this design?
Oh, well, the main reason being is that whichever way the wind blows, it's at an angle and it can't get a start again. It's, if you work it in one direction, sooner or later the wind will blow down there and it'll start blowing again. But as you can see, it's pretty windy and there's no sign of dust.
To bring stock home, some fences also need to be up. And with hundreds of kilometres destroyed, this is a mammoth task. While there are still months, possibly years of work ahead, volunteer groups like Blaze Aid are helping raise both boundaries and spirits.
The absolute positive out of this is the strength of the community, and there's a lot of friends that are outside the fireground who have just been astonishing. And likes of Blaze Aid, they come out to your paddock and it's been horrendous here at times during January. It's 40 degrees, blowing a dust storm, and you pull up beside them and they look at you with a big smile on their face and say, "What can I do for you today?" And you just think, shit, it's a good place.
Ed and Belinda Kay are surrounded by people's generosity. Kitchenware, linen, school supplies, clothes and shoes are among the donations they've received as they try to regain a sense of normality for their young children. A friend has even taken their home off the market so the Kays can rent it.
Here we go, let's get your seat.
The help is greatly appreciated, but it's also been very hard to accept.
To be given some of the really basic things to keep going, it's not something that we're familiar with. It's really hard to accept kindness in a way, and because you're always thinking, you know, I'm not a charity case. I feel guilty. You know, how come you're giving this to me? You know, but it's been incredibly hard to get my head around that.
Generosity has come from every corner in all shapes and sizes, from truckloads of fodder to this grader board, which local machinery dealers bought and are lending to farmers for free. Among the first to try it out on his scorched paddocks is Derek Tiller. More than 1,000 hectares of his family's wheat crop were destroyed, but that's nothing compared to their personal loss. Derek's uncle Alan Tiller, who had farmed in the area since leaving school, was one of 2 people killed in the bushfire.
The reality of the situation is a bit still daunting. Even the bare landscape's a little bit too hard to accept, and yeah, that's even more so.
There's no mistaking this is a community still grieving. But farmers like Derek Tiller are trying to focus on the positives as they push ahead.
We're taking advantage of the bare paddocks, because we don't have them, to use this grader board to level out old fence lines and to level out drift soil to make our paddocks cleaner.
The fires have in effect left a blank canvas. and some are taking the opportunity to paint a new picture that fits better with modern equipment and farming practices.
We've redesigned where the fences will go, we've redesigned the internal roadways, we're redesigning the shed complexes, and we're redesigning houses and gardens. So we didn't want to just rebuild how it was, because if you're looking for a positive to come out of this, then you need to think what this farm should look like in 10 or 20 years' time.
In the short term, though, there's this year's crops to worry about, and many farmers are feeling the pressure to be ready in time.
Since the fire, I've done 2 days of what I would call normal farm work. The rest has been to do with insurance, demolition, repair and purchase, I guess, to get the farm back into a running order. So seeding's going to come at us with a rush.
With no stubble to sow into, grain growers are likely to go light on lentils, which they've done well with in recent years, and favour cereals. How well the crops will go is hard to tell, with the extent of the soil damage still unknown. But the Primary Industries Department says while the topsoil has taken a hammering, despite appearances, there's still plenty of life in this land.
The speed of the fire, it was burning at something like 10,000 hectares per hour, means that it probably didn't hang around and start burning things underneath the soil. We think that probably the organic matter levels are still fairly intact.
I'll know that things are back to normal once we get the crop come up. Once there's green out in the paddock, not just weeds but actual crop, then I'll know that everything's going to be all right.
As for the fishers, they're still planning to hold their annual ram sale and have several hundred lambs on the ground this year. The environmental, physical and emotional recovery may take much longer, but it's clear there's still a lot of fight in these farmers.
On the 26th of November, we were sort of, in boxing terms, we were on the canvas out for the count, but now we're sort of back. We're not even leaning on the ropes, we're out in the middle with the gloves on, and we're ready to go.